Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, part 2 of our conversation about concussion. We've already met athletes whose lives have been totally changed by having a brain injury. Now we're going to unpack what it actually means for the rest of us if we better understand concussion.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and I'll be looking through all of your live feedback as it comes in. We ended our last program with a comment from someone in our community. If you missed it, here's what Alex Kelly had to say about how the loss of a young rugby player is sparking change.
My name is Alex Kelly, and I'm a national spokesperson with Parachute, a Canadian injury prevention charity. And we believe as long as there continues to be concussions and traumatic brain injuries on the sports field, that there's more work to be done. Rowan Stringer was a beautiful, vibrant young woman who was playing rugby and sustained 2 concussions over the course of a week and succumbed to her injuries. And it's stories like that that we work to prevent. We believe in collective action and empowering people to educate them to prevent concussions.
Acknowledgement of the link between contact sports and brain injuries is one step in addressing the problem, but what exactly happens to us when we get a concussion? Well, our brain is gelatinous tissue. It's encased in bone, wrapped in membrane, and floating in fluid. So when it gets hit, the brain stretches and moves around the skull, and this temporarily affects the way it works. So nerves get stretched and signals sent from our brain to the rest of our body are impacted. Concussion can lead to brain swelling in a space with very little room to expand. Studies have shown that multiple traumatic brain injuries can lead to memory loss and depression, dementia, and a whole range of mental disorders. Joining us in our studio to talk about this, we have Katherine Snedaker. She is a licensed clinical social worker and executive director of PinkConcussions.com. Dr. Gerard Gioia is the Division Chief of Neuropsychology in the Children's National Health System here in Washington, D.C., and he works extensively with professional and local sports teams. Amanda Batty is an American professional downhill mountain biker, and Gordon Stringer lost his daughter Rowan in May 2013. She was a high school rugby player who experienced 3 undetected concussions within a week, and that video comment that was right at the top of the show, that was referring to his daughter. So, women and young women and girls and kids are incredibly vulnerable to concussions. Katherine, do you want to tell us why?
We don't exactly know, and we just know that in the beginnings of the research we see differences, and so much research has to be done. And in some age groups, research hasn't been done at all. We do know that high school students in the research have more concussions than college, but some of that's been extrapolated to the middle school and younger, but we really don't know under 13.
All right, you don't know. Jerry, do you know?
Well, you know, we do research at Children's National Health System in our SCORE concussion program, and we've looked at groups of children from before adolescence, so age 5 all the way through 18, and we see that boys and girls are not so different in their concussion outcomes, that is, their recoveries, when they're before adolescence. But when you get to adolescence, the boys and the girls change, and it seems like the girls are taking longer to recover, may have a different path of recovery.
And this piece with gender, we do see differences in the injury rates of females with the type of symptoms that come, the times the symptoms appear, and also on the recovery times. And depending on the studies, there are different answers, but we do know that there are gender differences. And that's true in the civilian population, in the military population, and in the sports population.
See, this must all resonate with Gordon. Gordon's had a daughter called Rowan. This is a picture of Rowan here. Rowan loved to play rugby, and she got hurt a lot, and you didn't realise she was being hurt. Gordon, do you want to pick up the story from there?
Sure. She'd just actually taken up rugby. She'd been playing for about a year when the accident happened. She was quite an active young lady. She played a lot of sports growing up, ringette, lacrosse. She played with the boys, flag football, downhill snowboarding, all kinds of things. But in grade 11, she picked up rugby, fell in love with it, basically. And in her second year, after she had played for high school and her club team for 1 year, she was the captain on her high school team for the second year. They had a pre-season tournament to kind of warm up on the Friday in May. There was 3 shortened games, and during one of those games, she apparently took a knock to the head. They did remove her from play. She didn't really complain about anything at all. You know, it was a hot day, lots of things going on. Then on the Saturday, she woke up with a headache, but again, that wasn't unusual for Rowan. She was a young lady who tended to get headaches out of whatever. No, she just had them. So we didn't really think much about it. She took Advil. The headache went away. Sunday, she seemed fine. We had a family gathering, and she seemed normal. Monday, she had a game with the school, a league game. We weren't there. We found out after the fact that she took another knock to the head in that game. But again, it was interesting to hear in the first part the talk about visible injury, because she actually sustained quite a bruise on her knee in the Monday game. So we were more, of course, we were focused on that. That's what we could see. And she didn't mention anything about being hit to the head again in Monday. And then she had a game on Wednesday. And this was the game where she took what ultimately was the fatal hit. She was swing tackle. They called it a swing tackle. She wasn't tackled in the proper manner, the manner they're taught. The opposing player actually grabbed her by the jersey, and between Rowan's momentum and the girl tossing her, she went airborne, landed on her head on the ground, and lost consciousness. And she never regained consciousness from there. So, and we found there was a coroner's inquest into her death last year, and through that process, we found out that the conclusion from the neurological examinations by the experts was that her death was, it's called second impact syndrome, where you have multiple undiagnosed concussions.
Sure.
And one of them ends up with in a fatal result, as with Rowan. So
Gordon, we are so sorry for your loss, and we really thank you for being part of this program, because you are living the experience of what concussion can do to a youngster. I know, Malika, you want to jump off from there. Where do you want to take us?
Well, and picking up on some of that conversation and how we got into it was on whether or not being a woman helps or detracts from being diagnosed correctly. There is a video comment we got from someone named Julie, and she had thoughts on that.
Is there enough awareness of head injury in women's sports? At this point, I'd have to say no. Most focus goes to football. You rarely hear about this topic, and there hasn't been enough research. So I think it's important for individuals, parents, and coaches to learn the signs and symptoms and take action if something occurs. Also, it's time for medical and research communities to put more focus on this area. It's time to make progress.
Katherine, I could see you react to that as she said that.
Oh, Julie's great. I know Julie from our Twitter community. Julie's got a great website with a lot of information on female hormones. Just went to the Stringer family. I had the pleasure of meeting them. We gave them an award this year. And I know a little about Rowan's story, that she asked a male of one of her friends, she asked about a concussion, and he said back to her, you know, you'd know if you had one. And she went online and she looked up concussion. So here's someone who's the daughter of a nurse who's looking on the internet. She was trying to find the answer. She wasn't, you know, I know I'm concussed and I'm just going to go back out there. She was trying to find the answer, and that's where the education piece, you know, and my research has shown we don't educate our girls. We don't have athletic trainers at the girls' events. They'll be at the football events on call for the boys. They don't have video games where head injuries are a part of the FIFA or the first-person shooter games. Our girls are not prepared for concussions, and they don't know the signs and symptoms, which can appear different than males.
Joey, what do you want to say?
Well,
and Amanda. Joey, then Amanda.
I think that varies around the country, and but I think the point is that we don't have enough research to understand the differences between boys and girls on this. I certainly know that in the variety of school systems that I work with and in the the various collegiate sports, we take girls as seriously with this injury as boys, but again, we don't understand if there are differences or not, and especially when we're talking about kids. So, I think one of the issues that we really have ultimately, tried to start with at least, and it's not the end, but start with, is how do we help people to learn the signs or symptoms? How do we put things in their pocket? We developed a smartphone app a number of years ago that helps you walk through those signs and symptoms. That's very important that people have at least some understanding.
Amanda.
I'd like to interject here because going back to the fact that girls are often undiagnosed, it's called the invisible injury. If you look at heart research, heart disease research, you'll see that women are often undiagnosed much more often than men as far as heart disease goes. And I think that's also a very good reason that a lot of women have undiagnosed head injuries.
Amanda, so Jerry's saying...
I would not agree that that's the case, certainly in high school, in collegiate sports, that we see that girls are undiagnosed relative to boys with concussion.
Well, if you'll give me a second. So as someone who competed in a few different sports in high school, who snowboarded semi-competitively, I often had to push frequently for examination for concussions, and especially in the photo that was shown in the last segment of my injury where I'm in the hospital bed, that injury was really interesting because even as a patient with an extreme history of serious traumatic brain injuries, they were about to release me from the hospital until I started, my sign is vomiting, until I started vomiting, and my vocabulary was impacted negatively to the point where I'm sure you've seen it, doctor, when patients often mix up words. Yeah. So they mean to say something, but a different word or no word comes out at all. Yeah. And I had been in the ER for probably 4 hours. They were on the verge of releasing me when this started happening. And they realized just in the nick of time that I had a subdural hematoma and that this was actually a very serious issue. And upon further, after an MRI and after a CAT scan, they realized that I had a brain bleed and there was something really serious going on.
Yeah, and you're raising a number of important points, which is that, our understanding of traumatic brain injury, whether you're male or female, is not where it needs to be. And I would say that a number of years ago, we were missing what was happening with girls. I would say that, all of our educational efforts in the last, 3-4 years with the state laws are trying to be inclusive in that regard. Yeah. So there's clearly a generational effect.
And we need to redo a lot of the research. The animal models that we base a lot of this on were done on all male rats.
So what do we know today about concussion in terms of research?
In terms of gender?
Yes.
In terms of gender, we know that there are differences. There are differences that show up in the military research, in the civilian research, and the sports research. And depending on how the study is set up, and there's certain biases that we see these differences. One of the initial differences is injury rates. With sports with the same rules, so that would be basketball, that would be soccer, that would not be lacrosse, where the rules are the same, that you'll see that overall, boys have more concussions than girls.
Right.
But if you compare 1,000 hours of play to 1,000 hours of play, you will see girls concussing 2 to 3 times boys in injury rates.
So we're talking about gender here. I want to push it on just a little bit and talk about age, something that we've touched on, but this is something people online are concerned about. This is Concerned Mom. She writes in, I would like to see greater awareness of the need for primary prevention and proper care with our youngest athletes. She goes on to say we need to modify sports to make them age appropriate and reduce the level of contact for youngest players and for any team lacking sideline medical officials. Gordon, do you want to pick up on that? Do you think that that's something that would help?
I think, yeah, if sports adapt a little bit, it definitely would help. One of the things we're pushing for here is, I noticed you put the photo up for Rowans Law, and one of the things, the key pillars to that is education, particularly of kids, on the importance of looking after your brain. They have programs available Parachute Canada has a brainwaves program that they can go into schools to teach kids, you know, as young as grade 3, starting with them, the importance of protecting your brain. And
so Gordon, what is Rowans Law? Because you told us the story about Rowan at the very beginning of our show, but you didn't leave it at that. You didn't lose your daughter and then grieve and then do nothing. You moved on, and you're doing what? Because this is really important. Tell us about Rowans Law.
Through the coroner's inquest into her death, the jury and the coroner came out with 49 recommendations as to how to move forward on concussion awareness, treatment, education, etc. And their first recommendation was for Ontario, the province of Ontario here, to adopt Rowans Law, which has 4 pillars essentially to it. The education of all players, parents, coaches, teachers involved in school-based and non-school-based sport. It doesn't discriminate amongst sports, it just says sport.
Do you think it's going to work, Gordon? Do you think people?
Sorry?
Do you think it's going to work?
I think it's part of the process that needs to happen. As referred to earlier, the change in what do they call it? The sports
culture.
The way sports are looked at. The
culture.
Pardon me?
The culture of sports.
The culture of sport. Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I lost the word there. But yeah, it's the change in the culture of sport has to take place starting with the younger generations. We've equated it here ourselves to things like drunk driving programs or anti-bullying campaigns, where if you start with the kids young, it's what they grow up knowing and doing. So there are ways that you can educate the kids at a very young age, starting in grade 3 at schools in their health program or their phys ed program.
Sure. As
part of it, looking after their brain health, how important it is to make sure that if you get a knock on the head, if you are feeling dizzy or whatever afterwards, you let somebody know so that you can be looked after. And this is where you're going to get the change in the culture of sport, is starting educating the kids young, age-appropriate education, and that's what they grow up knowing and doing. They just, it becomes part of what they do as a person.
Gordon, I agree. I wanted to ask you, Gordon, I've been wearing my Rowans, I support Rowans Law. Do you still need signatures under #Rowans Law?
We can always use more signatures.
So that's something, if you want to do something today, if you want to be part of a country looking at this, to do #Rowans Law and sign the petition and help Ontario be the first part of Canada to pass this law. I think it's really, important. I'll put a plug in for signing the petition.
Yeah.
And of course, that hashtag you mentioned, we are tweeting it out, and that page is here on my screen now, Rowans Law. That's the page you've been seeing throughout today's show.
Takes 10 seconds. You can do it.
Probably even quicker than that, so just follow the tweet that we'll be sending out. But in talking about what athletes should be doing, there is a conversation online about where else some of this responsibility might come from or could come from. This is a video comment we got from someone named Dr. Frederick Carrick. I want you to have a listen to what he said.
When we look at the accountability for concussions, who's responsible for your head? Ultimately, it's the athlete, but it's society as well. Tolerance of cheap shots, for instance, in hockey and football are becoming at the point that people are saying, we don't want any more of this type of activity.
And I think it differs in America, because in America, our youngest athletes have the most inexperienced volunteer parent coaches. And in different parts of the world, the youngest athletes have paid coaches. So depending on where you are.
What are you talking about? You're like 5 and 6 and 7.
Yeah, I mean, if you
paid coaches.
Well, you think of the Russian athletes where they take people into academies.
I mean, they're professional athletes, even though they're really young. That's not like kids kicking a ball around on a Saturday.
Right. But I think in soccer too, in different countries.
When you're talking about professional programs, but we're talking about what happens in the States, because I know when I grew up in the UK, you just go play football and then the parents kind of help.
Right. And it's those.
And we don't have professional coaches. We have dads yelling, "Go on, my son, do it, get in there.
And it's those parents that we need to educate. And there's been a pushback that said, you know what, if we ask them to take this training, they'll run off, they won't coach.
Yeah. So what I'm detecting in this, and Jerry and Katherine, you can tell me if I'm reading this right. There is a war between mums who are seeing what's happening to their kids and then the medical profession who maybe not be as sensitive as the mums who are seeing what's happening to their children. Is there a war between these two areas?
Well, it may vary around the world. I know the medical profession has become much more sensitized in the United States about this problem, but I will also say that we are still lagging behind in terms of really training them to diagnose and to treat and manage this. So there's still a gap.
And there's I want to jump in there, though, and seeing that gap, and you had that discrepancy, but what that video comment was actually about was the onus being on those of us who watch these sports. And Amanda, I saw you nodding your head when he talked about that. Some of it's on the sports athletes themselves, and some of it is on us who want that to happen.
Well, I would say, I mean, you look at sports like mountain biking, for instance, downhill mountain biking, which has gotten huge in the U.S. over the last few years. We have a competition called something called Bull Rampage. It's put on by the company Red Bull, and there have been huge, NBC picked it up last year. There's been a huge response to it, and I can't watch it anymore personally as an athlete, but there has been a huge public response, and a lot of people tune in for the same reason. I believe that a lot of people tune in for the same reason that they tune in to watch NASCAR or Formula One, is because like he said, the cheap shots, they want to see the crashes, they want to see the gore. And I think that there's a pressure to see this, that a huge part of the audience is actually betting on the damage that comes from, the risks. And unfortunately, that's not always educated, and it's not always, like those photos.
Yeah, this is you. Explain what's happening in these two photos before we move on. Because you were delivering excitement just by you crashing your bike here.
Yes.
Yeah, Amanda.
So in both of those photos, I'm crashing.
Yes.
The photo on the left, I'm in red.
Yes.
That was actually at the bottom of a rock garden as part of a race course. And they put the rock gardens here. And usually most of the people, most spectators gather around high-risk spots, very sketchy jumps.
They're looking for blood, Amanda.
Yeah, they really are.
Wow.
And it's sort of a bit vampire culture, but you also see it in football and hockey.
Sure.
You see it in kids sports too. There are a lot of people, a lot of dads.
All right. Listen, guests, I've got 2 minutes, and it would be remiss of me if I didn't ask you to tell each of you, tell us one sign that we need to know as parents, as friends, as people who watch sport, as people who might actually just knock ourselves out. One sign that we have a concussion. Amanda, what's one sign? Important.
I would say disorientation.
Okay.
Huge disorientation. If you notice something off with someone, if they seem unable to grasp words or they are having trouble balancing, disorientation is the #1 symptom.
Gordon, one sign.
Well, with Rowan, it seemed to be the headaches. Was the one sign that she gave, but we didn't really pick up on. But she also had the disorientation as well.
Katherine.
I think it would be just in your gut that something's not right. It's your intuition, and so often people don't trust their intuition, but if it's just not the person you know.
Something's just a little bit off about
Something's off. And we all have headaches, we all have stomach aches. There has to be a hit plus this.
And Jerry's got an app.
So I'm going to wrap around this because it's not just one sign. If you miss that because that individual doesn't have that sign, you got a problem. You can go to Concussion Recognition and Response. It's a free app. It uses all of our CDC heads-up materials, and it lists the various signs and symptoms that you should be looking for. And you record them on there, and you can email that to your doctor. You can have that available to you. It's important to recognize all the signs and symptoms.
And I have to just say the app is amazing. If people could just, it's free, and if you could put it on your phone.
One more time, repeat it.
So it's called the Concussion Recognition and Response app.
Wow, we had a two-parter show. Community still weighing in.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. Nas wants that. He says we need tools to assess the return to play, and they should be available for athletic therapists, trainers, and of course the athletes themselves.
So Katherine and Jerry and Amanda and Gordon, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for watching as well. We've covered so much in this two-part special. Until the next time, see you soon.